As it is by now widely known, the European green transition is one of the key priorities of the Portuguese presidency of the Council of the European Union. However, climate change, environmental protection, clean energies, all are global problems. To be successful, a green transition has necessarily to be implemented also outside Europe boundaries. Having this in mind, the Portuguese presidency decided to organize, as one of the flagships of its program, a high-level green investment forum, EU-Africa, under the theme Africa's Green Future, New Investment Pathways Towards Sustainable Inclusive Development. It is jointly organized with the European Investment Bank and will take place on the 23rd of April with Lisbon as its base. It will bring together leading government and business figures, international and development financial institutions, academia, and non-governmental organizations. And the objective is to get the perspective of both public and private sectors on sustainable development and green investment in Africa, showcasing how green and sustainable business models are profitable, create jobs, and generate wealth, while contributing to achieve the world's climate objectives and the UN SDGs. In order to raise awareness to this event, but also to allow for the widest possible debate on the many topics and issues it covers, different events were organized or are being organized in many capitals around the world under the common title Green Talks. In Copenhagen, the Embassy of Portugal had the good fortune to find the ideal partner to organize this local Green Talk, and I would like to warmly thank the indispensable support given by the Danish Foreign Policy Society, our co-organizer, especially the person of its director, Charlotte Flint Peterson. And a deep acknowledgement and thanks to the 5 guest speakers that accepted the invitation to intervene today. I think we have a very nice and interesting group of speakers. For the sake of brevity, I will not mention right now all of them, but I think everybody will understand if I make a special reference to the participation of a member of the Portuguese government, Secretary of State Inês dos Santos, Secretary of State for Environment, Inês dos Santos Costa, and also a reference to my predecessor as ambassador to Denmark, Rita Laranjinha, known to many of you, now with the high responsibilities in the European External Action Service. I look forward to all interventions, and I wish everybody an enjoyable and informative webinar. I thank you for your attention, and without much further ado, I will give the floor to His Excellency, the Secretary of State for Environment of Portugal, Ms. Inês dos Santos Costa. Please, you have the floor.
Thank you, Ambassador, and ladies and gentlemen, hello. And let me start by, of course, congratulating the organizers of this event and the organization of this event, wishing this to be a very fruitful discussion. And a word of advice, if you leave with more questions than answers, do not be surprised, because that is the weight of dealing with such a complex issue, such as a green future or a green transition. And sometimes we lose sight of why we need this green transition. Errol Friedel, a circular economy advocate, has a simple mnemonic, which is 1, 10, 100, 1,000, and 10,000. He says that 1% of world population has more accumulated wealth than the rest of the humanity put together. 10, because we have less than 10 years to avoid climate and natural collapse. 100, because every year we lose 100 species that go extinct. 1,000 is there is more 1,000 more money going into fossil fuel subsidies than on green solutions. And 10,000 is just because in one day in 2020 there were 10,000 active large forest fires in the world at the same time. So this mnemonic serves to remind us that words such as promoting a green future, that are not a catchphrase, they have a meaning. They mean acting together with the humility, recognition, and collaboration needed to really leave no one behind, prospering together within our planetary limits. The aftermath of the COVID-19 pandemic is a defining moment, a chance to build green bridges with other countries and continents away from a take, make, pollute model of development that allows us to reduce material and energy consumption, to tackle climate change without sacrificing human prosperity. Those bridges cannot be built with gray embankments. This is a global challenge. From heat waves to floods to droughts, climate change effects are felt all over the world, but disproportionately. We need to apply a systemic approach to sharing ideas and solutions among governments, organizations, public and private sectors, as well as the civil society. And the next decade, as I said before, is critical, with a line with a carbon neutral trajectory. And there are several components needed for that alignment. Our production and consumption system, there is no doubt about it, but the heart moving this transformation must be made of clean energy sources. Data tells us that it's possible to achieve climate neutrality and a fairer society while preserving competitiveness of economies, investing in clean energy technologies and sustainable products and business models. But this requires organizational change and scaling up of technological innovations in energy, buildings, transport, industry, agriculture, to name a few. There is a tendency also to blame or downplay individual behavior versus political decision. But all inputs matter. The individual and local action has a transformative power of social familiarity, but changing an economic model demands bold policies and industrial transformation, which is difficult, but needed. And what is also important to understand is that they are not interchangeable. They must both be promoted and demanded. Without a circular, without a more inclusive global economy, our action will not be enough. The dimension of the problem goes beyond borders and beyond our economic capacities alone. The European Green Deal strives to make Europe the first climate neutral continent by 2050 to strengthen its role in leading by example. And aligned with this vision, the Portuguese presidency of the Council of the European Union is aligning promoting a green and fair transition worldwide and to build those green bridges with strategic partners. The Portuguese Ministry for Environment and Climate Action has already a solid rapport on developing such cooperation, aiming at assisting and improving national capacities to respond to the priorities and needs that its beneficiaries identify, namely climate change, mitigation and adaptation, and SDG actions. The core is a constant dialogue of mutual learning for better action design and hence better fit for purpose. And Portugal has a valuable and historic tradition of cooperation with Portuguese-speaking African countries in areas for this green transition, climate change, water resource management, water and wastewater services, waste management, energy, are just some of the fields where public and private Portuguese actors have been building these strong bridges with African countries, participating on technical assistance, capacity building, but also on infrastructure and policy development. Since 2016, this cooperation has been reinforced with the support of the Portuguese Environmental Fund. During the last 4 years, 2 million euros have been allocated annually to support climate change projects in Portuguese-speaking countries and other Maghreb countries. For example, in Tunisia, we've been cooperating on 3 priority areas: sanitation, waste management, and environmental education, with projects rolling out as we speak. And in 2021, this year, we renew this commitment of the Environmental Fund to international cooperation on climate change, and new partners are being supported. These are just concrete examples of green investment and most of all of solid and reliable partnerships to achieve the 2030 Agenda and Paris Agreement goals. As stated in the European Union Council conclusions on climate and energy diplomacy, the EU is committed to further scale up the mobilization of international climate finance including sustainable finance practices, as a contribution to the transition of climate neutrality. And Portugal, of course, is part of this commitment and is working closely with its external partners to build this sustainable, fair, resilient future, leaving no one behind. However, we know the transition to a decarbonized, circular and sustainable economy is a challenge demanding planning and action for the long term. We also know that beneficiary countries start from different level playing fields, influencing the pace of achievements. And also, traditional partners of Portuguese cooperation still very much rely on fossil fuel use. So therefore, resources for cooperation must be channeled to projects that support a fair and just transition of the economies of partner countries towards decarbonization and sustainability. As the United Nations motto says, we need to recover better. If we want to be leaders, we must lead by example. That is why financial packages have to be adaptable, channeling the context's strengths, never losing sight of the Paris Agreement objectives, and in this concept, more than the 672 billion of the Recovery and Resilience Facility are key. Portugal stands at the forefront, targeting investments of up to 14 billion until 2026 in areas such as industrial decarbonization, bioeconomy, forestry, water management, sustainable transportation, energy efficiency, and hydrogen and renewable energy. And these investments are part of the base for an environmental, sustainable economic recovery. And I am sure that we may come to be an example of how we can protect the society and economy by protecting the natural system that supports them both. Recovery is global and must also rely on international cooperation and solidarity. Europe must lead these efforts and be ready to support its external partners, especially in the three main planetary risks: climate change, biodiversity loss, and pollution from human activity. We must embrace the principles of a more circular economy beyond waste management into effectively changing the social and economic architecture in order to effectively reduce material and energy consumption. We need to design, to produce, to use, to manage in a way that increases the resilience time of all resources in the production and consumption system. We need greater durability in products, repairable, that are non-toxic, sufficient, and prioritize local resources based on renewable energy, giving back more than what we take from the natural system. As the UN Secretary General made very clear during the launch of UNEP's Making Peace with Nature report, 2021 will be a make it or break it year for nature. In several upcoming major events with critical environmental international negotiations taking place, particularly the conferences of the parties of the 3 Rio Conventions. We must grab this momentum to invest in a recovery based on these principles through an effective science policy interface. Carbon neutrality will not be possible without a swift transition from linear, fossil fuel-based economic model to a circular, carbon neutral one, protecting and regenerating our critical environmental services, our biodiversity, our air, our water, our soil, respecting the limits of our planet, the planet that is of all species. And this is possible by bridging the divides, by rapidly deliver jobs, growth, and improve the way of life of citizens worldwide, contributing to build more resilient societies. There is, as I say, wisdom in Proverbs, and there are African proverbs that encapsulate our challenges for today, tomorrow, and beyond. If you close your eyes to facts, you will learn through accidents. If we ignore what science is telling us, we will suffer the consequences, no doubt. And to tackle these challenges, Europe cannot go alone, because if we want to go far, we must go together. Thank you very much for this possibility to share this speech with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mrs. State Secretary Santos Costas. Thank you very much. Stay on, we'll talk later on in the chat, but now I'm pleased to welcome Managing Director for Africa, Mrs. Rita of the External Action Service, Mrs. Rita Lafrenigia, I hope. Welcome. And if you could unmute.
I am unmuting. Thank you so much, Charlotte, for this invitation, and thank you for the also to the Portuguese embassy. It is a pleasure to be back in Copenhagen, even if only virtually, and to participate in this event, which is very timely and I think very interesting. As you know, so I will mainly focus on Africa, since I have this now I'm representing the European External Action Service, and I'm the new managing director for Africa, as you mentioned. As I think that you are probably all aware, there was a joint communication that was approved last March on a comprehensive strategy with Africa, and 5 main partnerships were identified. The first one being on green transition and energy access. So the European Union's aim was, after the adoption of this joint strategy, to engage with our African partners to work on a common strategy after the identification of the European Union's objectives. But unfortunately, the pandemic disturbed our common work and made it more difficult. So this initiative that the Portuguese presidency took to organize this, to convene this high-level meeting between the that is dealing with the EU-Africa Green Investment Forum is so important, because it gives us the opportunity to bring together relevant actors to identify the best strategies to move forward in the definition of our partnership in the Green Deal agenda. And the idea that was also that came forward to organize these green talks around Europe and beyond, and also in Africa, is also very positive, because it is a way of enlarging the discussion and of bringing more experiences and more actors together in this conversation that it is essential that we have with our African partners. On the EAS perspective, and on these issues of the Green Partnership, I would highlight 3 main issues. The first one is the one that I think that is in a lot of minds, especially because I know that I'm accompanied by a lot of colleagues from different embassies, which is the preparations of the EU-African Union Summit. As you know, it was supposed to take place this year, but unfortunately it has not yet been possible to organize it. At this point, we do not have a date in mind. The situation in Brussels is still very difficult, as you know, and the decision was taken that this summit has to take place in presence, so that we can gather together the leaders of the African Union and the leaders of the European Union, and that at this point it is still not possible, unfortunately, to do it. The African Union itself has decided that its first meeting in presence, high-level meeting in presence, will not take place before July. And so before that, it is not possible that we will also think about convening a summit. And we will need also to look into the different waves of pandemics in Europe, in Africa, and the vaccination of all leaders. So still, unfortunately, some time before we will be able to organize this meeting. Again, that is why it is important that we keep these issues on the agenda, and even if it is not at the highest level, that we have these discussions, and that we continue to insist, as the Secretary of State has so well put it, on the importance of the green agenda and on the relevance of this issue. The second idea that I would like to convey to you is on the political context of the debate on the green agenda with our African partners. I think that there is no doubt that there is a broad agreement between us in Europe and our African partners that climate change presents one of the most significant challenges of the world to the world's population, and its effects are felt everywhere. And unfortunately, they are Africa is particularly vulnerable to climate change. And of course, the investments needed are enormous so that we can help mitigate the effects of climate change, and as the Secretary of State has insisted, to create jobs and opportunities for African women and men to enjoy a more prosperous future. Of course, that's the post-pandemic recovery context is, of course, essential in this regard, that we duly build back better, as the UN Secretary General has so well put it. But in our discussions, I think that it is very important that we take into account the concerns of our African partners in this discussion, and the very legitimate concerns of our African partners. I know that the Portuguese presidency is very well aware of these concerns, and that is exactly why this event on the 33rd of April was organized, exactly that we could that the Portuguese presidency could help show how green investments and the green agenda is also positive for partners that come from a different situation that we come from. You will, although the Portuguese presidency is aware of that, I see it from Brussels that it is still not widely perceived, that it is not still widely understood that we have to take into account some reservations, and that we have to increase the opportunities of dialogue with our African partners in this regard. Because they are worried that the green agenda may be taken forward in detriment to their own development. This concern exists. There's a concern that the green agenda is a sort of a non-tariff barrier to trade in detriment to the least developed countries' opportunities. And because the rules are very demanding, the Secretary of State mentioned the importance of the level playing field. Our African partners are still not there, and they claim, rightly so, that they have not been major polluters as we have been over the last decades, and that they are now also asked to contribute to this transition. To face the consequences of inadequate models of development that were the ones that the Western world has been putting into place in the last decades. So these, of course, are concerns that we have to reflect on our discussions, and that we have to, I think that we have to have the correct arguments to make our partners understand that our intentions to build back better are to do it contributing with them and supporting them, as the Secretary of State has also rightly pointed out, with the adequate financial instruments. I think that, from a managing director for Africa's perspective, I think I have the responsibility to also put these concerns on the table. The last thing that I would like to add to our discussion, and also because this is part of my daily work, is the fact that the green transition is also so important, and the fight against the climate change, also because so many conflicts in Africa have environmental root causes. And these are multiplying by the day, and we are faced in different regions of Africa with conflicts that do not only have environmental causes, but have very serious environmental causes that are brought together with other types of insecurity issues that build up very difficult conflicts to deal with. Just this morning, for instance, I was reading a report from a high-level meeting in which the President Buhari from Nigeria was admitting that and saying that climate change has contributed to rising insurgency and armed conflict, which are ravaging the country and the rest of the African continent, with resultant displacement of persons and livelihoods. So this is something that the African leaders are, of course, admitting, and he has also stressed that the situation in the Lake Chad Basin is an example of the risks and effects associated with climate change. I don't know if you are aware, but the Lake Chad used to be once the largest source of water in Africa, and it lost 90% of its volume since the 60s. And of course, tensions have been arising since then. We are talking about 30 million people that live around the lake, in the borders of the lake, and that are dependent on this lake that has lost 90% of its volume. And tensions between farmers and nomad populations that raise cattle in quest of fertile lands are very serious, and they are very difficult to overcome until we will not be able to overcome the difficulties that arise from the scarcity of water. There are other examples. We are nowadays, it has been very high on the agenda, the discussions that are taking place around the construction of the Grand Renaissance Dam in Ethiopia. The scarcity of water has made this debate so serious. It involves Ethiopia, it involves Egypt and Sudan that are downstream, and it of course adds to the very serious complexity of the situation in the Horn of Africa. In the Sahel, chronic poverty, high population growth, insecurity, climate hazards remain a driver of humanitarian needs, of disruption of livelihoods, population displacements that feed into a very complex and volatile situation, and increased security risks. In Southern Africa and also in Portugal, we have been following with great attention the situation in Mozambique. The situation was very dire already in the north of the country, and the impact of the cyclones made the country even more fragile, and the situation of the population in the province of Cabo Delgado even more difficult. So the European Union tries to put in place, of course, in coordination with the governments in region, the appropriate measures to fight all these conflicts, but the fact that we need to take into account these environmental conditionalities remains a matter of very serious concern. And so that is why I think that we also need to plead for an effective and sustainable green transition, as we will be pleading for in this event on the 23rd of April. And I think that it is a common objective of the European Union. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rita, for this also very important intervention, putting also in place some of the situation in Africa in terms of environment, climate change, and conflicts. Now I'm pleased to pass on the word to the Danish Climate Ambassador, Thomas Anker Christensen. Welcome, Thomas, to this Green Talk.
Thank you very much, Charlotte, and thanks to you and Ambassador Cabral for inviting me and for organizing this very timely Green Talk on Africa in Copenhagen. And also great to see Rita again. Congratulations on your new role, Rita. What a tall agenda you are dealing with. I mean, I'm breathless by the breadth of topics you have to deal with on a daily basis. I will try to focus more on the energy dimension of the green question we are discussing here today. And I think it's an excellent opportunity for us in Denmark to engage in the preparations of the high-level forum that you, Joao, mentioned, and that Portugal, as president of the EU, is organizing in a few weeks. We think the focus on how to create a green economy and a partnership between Europe and Africa, and how to create wealth and jobs through investments, through cooperation, is a really timely discussion. So a few words on where we are as a Denmark. On climate and energy, we have been asked by the UN to be a global peer on SDG 7. The focus on will help us to, in a way, move forward on achieving the SDGs and the Paris Agreement. And let me say a few more words about the potential for renewable energy in Africa as we see it, a bit more about Denmark's contribution to the Euro-African Cooperation, and then end with a few words about Denmark's energy cooperation in Africa. Just to take a step back first about the opportunity of cooperation with Africa. It's the continent with the richest solar resources in the world. And solar energy prices have dropped by between 50 and 80% in the last 5 years alone. And they are now cheaper than fossil fuel. Similarly, Africa also has great both onshore and offshore wind. And if you only look at wind energy, studies show that half of the African countries, 27, have sufficient wind to theoretically supply all of Africa with electricity. So we have to ensure that the right policy framework and enabling environments are in place to attract investors, to allow the financing of these opportunities to take place. In Africa, a lot of energy has been installed by off-grid installation. We saw the move with mobile phones, and now we're seeing it with energy. That means that you're leapfrogging a costly and slow expansion of centralized grids, and that in a way accelerates the access to electricity for the almost 600 million people in Africa who are without access today. And we see the off-grid solution being bundled together in new business models where the low price are combined with the fintech solution, batteries, and in that way also give new opportunities to attract private finance to close that energy gap. That being said, we still believe that grids are also important to really go to scale in terms of renewable energy rollout. And transmission grids are vital in order to transport renewable energy from resource-rich areas to demand centers and to places where they don't have that much, also in geographic zones and areas with different resources. And in a way, if you look at the way we have managed to go to 100% renewable energy in Denmark, by using the kinds of windmills that are behind me in my screenshot, we have done so by creating an integrated transmission grid in Northern Europe that combines Swedish, Danish, Norwegian energy sources, and now soon also linking us to the UK and Northern Europe. And in that way, we have created both a grid and subsea interconnectors that allow us to have energy security and also intermittency, which means that even if the wind is not blowing, we get energy from our neighbors. And through that exchange, we all are better off. And that's why we also think that grid connectivity in Africa is important, and why we support the AU, which has made this a priority. The UK presidency of COP26, which will be held later this year, has created an Energy Transition Council, and they have put grid connectivity in Africa as one of the priorities on their agenda. And we are part of that council work. Connectivity and green energy transition is a key to addressing many of the complex and mutually reinforcing challenges in Africa. And that includes climate change, but also demographic dynamics, urbanization, the need for jobs for the young, and indeed the achievement of the other Sustainable Development Goals and the green recovery. And just to stress the jobs factor, it is important that the transition is also just and adds to social and economic progress. IRENA, the International Renewable Energy Agency, has shown that for each $1 million invested in renewables, it creates 25 jobs and another 10 in energy efficiency. And in Denmark, we have the experience from the wind in the North Sea that for every gigawatt we install, we create between 10 and 15,000 jobs. So the potential in energy is actually quite big. And that's why, secondly, we think that the EU-Africa partnership, which you talked about, Rita, is really important, and that in a way we can help our African partners to leapfrog some of the fossil experiences we have made in Europe. And you mentioned rightly that we need to listen carefully to our African friends and their concerns that they have been emitting so little. So why should they not emit a little bit more? But I think that has to do with the fact that renewable energy is actually cheaper than the fossil solution, and when you build new energy for the many millions who don't have energy access, it's both cheaper and more forward-leaning to build renewable energy than it is to go for the fossil solution. And we think that Euro-African cooperation can actually speed this up. We know that the AU Peace and Security Council recently discussed the climate change and decided to establish a special fund for climate change, and also have the intention to appoint a special envoy for climate change and security, which we very much welcome. And we also think that the summit, in fact, could focus on this kind of cooperation and the partnership between Europe and Africa. It could become a central pillar of our cooperation. And in order to support this, we launched, when we thought the summit would be in 2020, a high-level group on climate and green energy transition with high-level participants from both Europe and Africa, and with a very strong youth component. They came up with a report last December that was presented to a few of the leaders, but very much looking at the opportunities to strengthen cooperation in climate, in energy, bringing in the private sector, civil society, to work on deliverables for the summit in energy transition, in green investments, also with a focus on job creation and just transition. And in a way, the fact that the summit has been postponed gives us more time to work on these deliverables, including also how to bring in a youth in addressing these challenges in Africa, because we need to involve the young Africans meaningfully, politically, but also in terms of finding the most innovative and sustainable solutions and jobs. We also, as Denmark, strongly favor a more ambitious climate target in the EU's next development budget. It's called at least 30%, so we think we should go beyond that. And we should ensure a strong focus on access to green energy and clean water in the program. The EU Green Energy Initiative that you mentioned, Rita, is one we strongly support, and the aim of ensuring access to electricity for several 100 million people in Africa by 2030 is really important. The Danish private sector is also engaged in identifying investment opportunities through the Renewable Energy Solution for Africa program. Just let me end on the bilateral note. Africa as a continent receives the largest share of Danish development assistance. Globally, since 2018, we have doubled our funding of climate change to roughly $450 million in 2021. And roughly 80% of that support is planned towards Africa, towards increasing access to renewable energy, clean water, green job creation, and enhanced climate resilience in Africa. We're also engaging the Danish private sector and investors as we deepen the cooperation. Access to renewable energy as an enabler for the other SDGs is also important. And it is an important building block for strengthening climate resilience, including also smallholder farmers for agriculture and for urban development in Africa. As part of our push on SDG 7 as a global champion, we will also enhance our climate change adaptation efforts during the coming years. And we aim to mobilize financing to provide access to clean and renewable energy to 5.8 million people in Africa between now and 2023. So in conclusion, we in Denmark have built solid experience in terms of solutions for energy transition and investments, green investments in Africa. We are ready to share that expertise. We're ready to work with our African partners and the EU. We think the opportunities are there. And we very much look forward to also putting this at use for the summit and for improving EU-African relationships. So thank you very much, Charlotte and Ambassador Cabral, for this opportunity.
Thank you, Thomas. Thank you. And please also stay put, as we will have questions in the end. Now, I'm very pleased to hear from Mr. Said Moline, the CEO of the Moroccan Agency for Energy Efficiency, so actually from Africa. Welcome, Mr. Moline.
Thank you very much indeed for the invitation. I'm glad to be here today to talk from a continent where 600 million citizens don't have access to electricity. From a country where citizens are emitting 7 times less CO2 than European, or 10 times less than an American, but from a country where we have a really strong proactive policy for climate change. It's not just after the COP22, but 10 years ago, we had a huge event on energy sector, and the King's letter was very clear: priority to renewable energy and energy efficiency in our energy policy. We had a strategy 10 years ago with dedicated agencies. AME is one of them, Mazen is the other, IRESEN for R&D. We had a strategy with objective to reach 42% of our electricity in 2020 and 52% in 2030 should come from renewables. With objective also for energy efficiency in industry, agriculture, transport, buildings, with 20% of energy efficiency as an objective to reach. With new legislation, a law for renewable energy, a law for energy efficiency. Also with an approach, and we have the result today, we are having almost 4 gigawatts of renewables installed in the country. We're having more than 40,000 solar pumps installed in agriculture with farmers. And to be coherent in our policy, we stopped subsidizing fossil fuel. It's very important to be coherent in all our strategy. That's how now farmers are preferring to use solar pumps than diesel pumps. The payback is shorter because we stopped subsidizing diesel, but also because of the price of PV that decreased. And I'm quite optimistic because the cheapest way today to produce electricity, especially in Africa, is with renewable. There is huge opportunities. During the COP22, the King launched an event for with African head of states. He wanted to show how various sectors linked to climate change, agriculture, energy, water can be further developed in Africa by African actors. And we had a chance to show that we have some solutions. We had also in the industry, today 70% of the spare parts of the windmills are produced here in Morocco. We sent 500 young people in Denmark for training, and we have the wind blades factory today in Tangier. We are developing wind farms in the north, in the south, in Dakhla, in Laayoune, where many cities, we can develop huge projects, developing the regions, taking the wind renewables or the solar renewable in the region, creating jobs in the region for the young people in the region. It's very important. Renewables, they give the solutions, centralized or decentralized ones. And it's very important in the continent today to look at how we can propose some solutions for electricity in Africa, for water in Africa, for agriculture in Africa. The initiative launched during the COP22 called AAA, Adaptation of Agriculture in Africa, also showed that there is huge opportunities for all the sectors concerned by having a strong policy, but also what we have managed to have in Morocco, when we managed to have the lowest price for wind, 3 cents per kilowatt hour for big project in the wind sector. 3 cents per kilowatt hour because of dedicated institutions, because of legislation, because of the private sector investing, and PPPs is very important in this field, and because of governance. It's very important to have all those approaches, then you can reach those objectives. We're glad that also with the Mazen today, there is many projects in the continent with different countries in Africa, but also we have a training center labelized by UNESCO in Marrakesh. Capacity building is a key, especially for decentralized solutions. You need to have more and more young people in the continent trained with the capacity of sizing, installing, maintaining the solar home systems, the solar pumps, or the solar roofs. It's something that is very important. So I believe today, and I'm glad, and even during this pandemic, the kingdom decided to have a new approach and talked about green recovery, like many countries. And AME, the Moroccan Agency for Energy Efficiency, is becoming the Moroccan Agency for Green Economy. We are placed today under the authority of the Ministry of Industry, Trade, and Green and Digital Economy. But in addition to energy efficiency, AME missions were also expanded to sustainable mobility and clean production in the industry. Europe is preparing this carbon border tax. We are now having a mission of helping all our industries in Morocco to be decarbonized. And we can have decarbonization of the industry not only by decreasing the emissions, but also by decreasing the energy bills. Because it's a chance today that renewables are becoming cheaper and cheaper. And that's the way we have this approach today. And I'm sure for the whole continent, there is many opportunities, but we need to have the strong, not projects, but strategies in each country, giving visibility for 10, 20, 30 years to any investor with governance. It's very important, and dedicated agencies. That's what we want to show, and that we decided to, with different African partners, we are today doing this approach, presenting our approach, all the results of our approach, and showing that the Kingdom of Morocco today is ready to work, of course, with southern countries, but also in the north. And one thing, we're talking about Africa's green future. Europe has a key role to play. We can today, you can maybe import some green electricity from the south by creating jobs in the north and in the south. It's really a possibility today to show that having all those countries behind the Mediterranean Sea, today having huge potential for renewables and many opportunities for developing those projects. We believe that this approach can be done today, and we believe that we can have really new approach, creating, as I mentioned, jobs in the north and the south. Thank you very much for the invitation.
Thank you so much, Mr. Molina. I think that's also a very interesting perspective on actually both working south-south and working south-north in terms of creating a common, maybe energy grid, for example, across the Mediterranean. But thank you for your perspective. Now, the final speaker is the Vice President of the European Investment Bank, Mr. Christian Kettle-Thompson. And the European Investment Bank is also involved in the high-level forum on the 23rd of April. So welcome, Mr. Thompson. You just have to unmute, Mr. Thompson. Yep. Mr. Thompson, I think you still should unmute your microphone.
Yeah, but do you hear me now? Okay, thank you. Thank you. Sorry for this technical thing, and thank you for the introduction, and to you and the Portuguese Embassy in Copenhagen for organizing this event, and also to you, State Secretary Costas, and the presidency, European presidency, for this organizing this. This is part of a EU-wide concept of green talks on Africa. And also, thank you for the invitation to give an EIB perspective on this important challenge facing not only Africa, but also Europe and indeed the rest of the world. I'll use the opportunity today to give you an overview of how we in the EIB see this challenge and how we in the bank can contribute to meet it. The European Union committed in late 2019 to become the world's first climate neutral continent by 2050. And in the energy sector, the EU has now set itself ambitious targets by 2030, and EU member states are developing increasingly incredible policies to reach those targets. But the context in Africa is quite different. It is the region that contributes the least to greenhouse gas emissions, and yet it is already now heavily impacted by climate change. At the same time, 600 million Africans in sub-Saharan Africa live without access to electricity. And the growing population and need for economic progress calls for a very rapid increase of electricity supply, as also mentioned by some of the other speakers. And this increasing demand must be met with sustainable energy sources and as a basis for long-term prosperity. That's one of the reasons why cooperation between Africa and Europe is so important. Europe is a global leader in the renewable sector, and that positions European stakeholders in a very good position to cooperate with Africa in this endeavor. And the EIB's lending activities in Africa are therefore particularly focused on access to sustainable electricity. Together with our partners, we support solar energy in Zambia and Gambia, wind power and geothermal projects in Kenya, hydropower in Liberia, Burundi, and Madagascar. And the EIB is working on ambitious European and global initiatives to scale up renewable energy generation quickly and in a cost-efficient manner. As an example, the EIB was invited by the UN to co-lead the technical working group on energy finance and investment as part of the high-level dialogue on energy that will take place at the UN General Assembly in September. This is complemented by a very promising study in cooperation with the International Solar Alliance on providing solar systems to marginalized communities. New investments in electricity grids are key to achieve access to sustainable electricity. Hence, a regionally integrated transmission grid as the backbone of the system remains an important investment priority throughout Africa. However, and as also mentioned by Thomas before, in remote or sparsely populated rural areas, grid extensions are often not feasible. Mini grids and distributed household level systems can be in these places be an efficient method to electrify here. And we have invested and will invest in a range of off-grid solution companies that will improve access to energy for households and micro-enterprises across sub-Saharan Africa. But energy is not our only priority. Climate change and environmental degradation are already having significant impacts on Africans, affecting their incomes, livelihoods, health, food security, peace and stability, as well as migration patterns. In EIB, we have developed a climate risk assessment system to systematically review physical climate risk to the actual projects and ensure that these are suitably mitigated. Principally to ensure the performance of the project to deliver sustainable development impact, but also to mitigate credit risks. Even the best designed project does not deliver if washed away by floods. And it's also our experience that international capital markets, which we access to fund our loans, are increasingly sensitive of climate change risks. Commission Vice President Timmermans has repeated on several occasions that the EU has to get better at listening to the adaptation needs of the developing world. This has to be the backbone of any sustainable development plan, and it is something that the EIB will look increasingly to support through our new adaptation strategy to be completed this year. The poorest countries have only limited means to finance adaptation, and often these projects are less bankable than, say, an energy project. Therefore, both the EU and the IMF have been very clear that grant financing will be key for adaptation plans in the poorest countries. So to increase the impact of climate operations and its attractiveness to clients, the EIB will strengthen its cooperation with donors and other providers of concessional type financing for climate, and widen opportunities for co-financing and upstream project preparation. We need to use scarce public resources better and mobilize private investment, much more private investment, without which we will not succeed. And the EIB has, I believe, a strong track record in mobilizing private capital. One particularly promising area is our co-financing of private investment funds focused on sustainable solutions within a number of areas such as digitalization, natural capital, and energy. There's also an urgent need for tailored support for innovation. The EIB plans to increase its support for innovative technologies such as weather analytics and climate-resilient food systems. To that end, the EIB now supports the Climate Resilience and Adaptation Finance and Technology Transfer Facility, also called CRAFT, as you probably know, the first private sector fund dedicated to addressing these problems in developing countries. Building on our long experience in water projects, we're also to increase financing in the efficient supply of water, as many African countries are water stressed, and to expand sewage and wastewater treatment to reduce environmental impact and improve health. The climate action component of our activities outside the EU stood at more than a third over the last 5 years, and this number will gradually increase in line with our climate action commitments as outlined in our Climate Bank roadmap. We believe that a great strength of our lending activities outside of the EU lies in our ability to deploy EU sector expertise in partner countries. Climate is an area where the EIB's expertise is unmatched and urgently needed. In Africa alone, we achieved record lending levels last year, with signings amounting to more than 4.5 billion euros, and half of this with the private sector. And more than 70% of our investments in sub-Saharan Africa were targeted least developed countries and fragile states. While responding to the priorities of our African partners, we also, as the EU Bank, driven by EU external policy goals and invest in accordance with EU values and principles, and work together also with EIS, as Rita knows. And as an element of the European dialogue on the financial architecture of development, led by the Portuguese presidency, we suggest that we set up a separate development bank as part of the EIB group. Founded on our annual outside EU lending of almost 10 billion euros, it will have its own governance and management composed of development experts. This will complement the new and reformed EU system for development cooperation, and it will put EIB bankers, engineers, and other experts directly in cooperation with the EU delegations in all developing countries where the EU is active. We think that it will help maximize the impact of collective EU development cooperation in Team Europe by harnessing different types of resources in a common framework. A particular focus on this new entity will be to provide development finance for key EU priorities in Africa because of the great needs and important strategic EU policy targets there. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, and thank you to all the panelists. now I will pose a question to each while awaiting some questions in the chat room. And I'll start by Mrs. Santos Costa. So how will you actually secure that this agenda that you have so high on, you know, the Portuguese presidency has on the agenda will be taken forward by the next presidency? Could it be an idea, as we have all heard how important it is, and it's strengthening a partnership, it's important for the Sustainable Development Goal. Is there any talks about taking this agenda exactly to the next EU presidency?
Thank you for the question. We have been actively engaging in the what we call the trial, the troika, so to speak, of all the three presidencies: the preceding one, Germany, current one, and the next one with Slovenia. And we try to bring together all the essential subjects that we believe to be adamant to progress the green agenda and, of course, the Green Deal going into the future. Of course, any of the efforts that we apply in terms of our international relations, and you can see that in very much of the plans that the Green Deal that operationalize the Green Deal on the ground. They all mention transferring all these principles into our international relations. So I'm pretty sure that moving forward, such linkages with the EU-African relations will continue to go forward, since that is one of the axes of action embedded into the green agenda as it is. So I'm looking forward to seeing this agenda develop going into our international relations and into our commercial deals coming into the future.
Rita, one of the things that I understand is that, you know, you have a severe energy poverty actually in Africa, and especially in sub-Saharan Africa. The fact that was already mentioned that 500 million people are not sufficiently covered by reliable and affordable energy, which was mentioned also by Mr. Moline. How will the EU work to support a energy grid, actually, which is not only on a country by country level, but which is actually encompassing Africa as such, because I guess that is also important in you know, export, import of energy, so that you have a flexible energy system. Is that something in the pipeline for in your talks with the AU, for example, or ECOWAS, or other of the regional bodies in Africa?
Thank you, Charlotte. The importance of the energy grid that you mentioned is why we have linked in the strategy the Green Deal with energy access, because we very much understand that without the energy access there cannot be a just green transition. And of course these projects that have to do with the green transition and with the energy grid are part of the exercise that we are now doing on programming the next financial framework, which has not only bilateral programs, but which will also have a regional component, and has the EIB has the EIB as Vice President has very clearly stated the role of the private sector in this regard is essential, and that the financing that we can get from the EIB in this kind of projects is of course paramount. So indeed we are working on it, and it is something that is a request from many of our African partners, and that will be duly taken into account in the programming for the next 7 years that is now being prepared.
And Thomas, now you're the climate ambassador, and your main focus was actually on energy, but there's also a very big element of climate mitigation, which also Christian Kettel talked about, and that actually in climate mitigation is actually also very energy resourceful. You actually have to use a lot of energy. You have to have cooling systems. You have to have irrigation systems. You have to build climate walls, you could say, from the sea. So in somehow, Africa will need also to actually use a lot of energy to mitigate the impacts of climate change taking place in Africa. And that will actually might even rise the level of energy consumption and in Africa as such. How do you see our role not in the Danish development assistance, but also EU role in actually supporting Africa in climate mitigation efforts?
Thank you, Charlotte. And if you allow me, just one digression before I answer. I would just say your questions to the Portuguese presidency and to Rita, I think you should take into account that the focus on Africa is one shared by all member states and the European Commission. So it's not a question of one presidency or another. I mean, the von der Leyen Commission, the first thing they did coming into office was to take a joint trip to the whole Commission to Paris, and the first meeting they had was with their African partners. I mean, we forget now that there was a time when we could travel, and I think the importance of Africa for Europe that was manifest in that trip, in a way, has been carrying all the way through to now, as we are hopefully soon having the summit. And I think Portugal and Denmark, we've been working since at least 2019 on having this focus on climate and cooperation for the summit. So it's great that the Portuguese presidency is pushing this further than it would maybe otherwise have been, but I think this is very strong, embedded with both member states and EU institutions to do this. As we also heard from Christian Kettel, also now with the financial focus of the full force of the EIB, and I think the cooperation with Morocco is exemplary and one of true partnership. And we would, for one, also wish the grid connectivity across the Mediterranean to be of that caliber and that strength that could allow for that job creation and that vision that Morocco also have for how that cooperation could further be fruitful for both sides of the Mediterranean. That's clearly a vision that we share, and where we think the experience we've had in our part of Northern Europe is actually one that also could add to a positive outcome of this. But Charlotte, your question, words matter, and in a climate context, mitigation actually means lowering emissions and mitigating the emissions that you have, while I think what you're talking about in a sort of a climate nerd sense is adapting to climate change. So it's mitigation and adaptation, and mitigating the impact is indeed adapting to it. And I think that is where the focus has been for many years for Africa. It has been on adapting to the impacts of the droughts, of the severe consequences. But I think, as also is indirectly in your question, we have to look on Africa from a different perspective now, also as a land of opportunity, of a place where with the right energy resources, growth will happen, wealth will be created, jobs will be created, and there are more than 1 billion people living in Africa, and maybe for too long we have seen Africa as a sort of classical development cooperation, and not as a place where we actually have a partnership that is mutually beneficial, and where the kind of investments into and wealth creation that you are referring to happens. And I think we need that step change of approach to Africa. And in order to achieve that, abundance of energy that we can have through scaling up both solar and wind in Africa is a key component, because with abundance of energy, you will have access to cooling, to the fueling up of power stations for all kinds of modern technologies, and also energy for desalination of water, for agriculture, and for a whole range of activities that currently are difficult. So we do think that that's also why I focused on energy in my intervention, that the scaling up of renewable energy really is one of the keys for the future growth perspective of Africa as a whole. You're muted.
Yeah, thank you so much, Thomas. Now a question for Mr. Moulin. So how do you see the cooperation in Africa actually on climate and green energy solutions as we speak? And how do you see the role of Morocco in this equation?
Well, it's the key today. What we launched during the COP22 in Marrakesh was really linked to have much more links and some experiences that we had in Morocco to share with all the countries. It's very important. Connection, grid connection between countries. As you mentioned, Morocco is connected today to Algeria. It is connected to Spain, and very soon to Portugal, and to Mauritania in the future. So it's very important when you have you have a strong grid, more you can put big renewables and on the grid in the whole region. One other thing is to look at how we can show capacity building, as I mentioned. It's very key, but also financial support. We had the chance with the development banks like European Investment Bank, EBRD, AFD. We developed the MORCEF, the Moroccan Sustainable Energy Financial Facility. It's very important to look at the big projects, but it's also very important, especially in Africa, to look at the small projects, thousands of small projects. And for solar home systems, for solar pumping, for all the application of renewables, you need financings through local banks. And the MORCEF was those development banks were giving loans with grant to local banks, that this loan can also be applied to the citizens or the farmers or the small industries. So all those points has to be done. So that the link is to have more, of course, exchanges with other countries. We had more than 20. Mazen is concerned, IRESEN for R&D in Africa is concerned, AME, OINI, the utility also having a lot of cooperation with different utilities in the continent. It's all what we can do, but also with support of EU, with support of in the same approach, because we're talking about the Green Deal. We can believe in the Green Deal in Africa. And today, that's the key today, because we know the needs, but we know also the potential. And of course, more and more young people today, more and more people with capacity, so that can play also a role.
Allow me just to ask one more question. How is Morocco today affected by climate change? Do you feel the consequences of climate change?
Definitely, this continent, first of all, is the continent who is the least concern, is the least is the not well
emitting.
Is the least emitting continent, but with the strongest, the biggest impact on drought, on desertification, on flood, also in some regions. So in Morocco, we of course we are living the climate change impact on agriculture, and of course that's why this AAA initiative, adaptation for agriculture in Africa, because we have to adapt our agriculture today because of the climate change, and we have the chance to look at many solutions, but for that we need to, of course, to look at all the regions in the continent, but also in Morocco, how we are working on adaptation. We have a program for adaptation. At the same time, we have a program for mitigation. And it's very important to adapt the economy of the country, all the economies, not only agriculture, but other sectors are concerned. Tourism is concerned, fishery is concerned, industry is concerned in some region, in some case. So the water issue is a huge issue in the continent and also in Morocco.
Thank you. And Mr. Thompson, so how do you integrate climate change? You said that it's very much part of all the investment that you make, but how do you do it concretely? Because, you know, then you have a flood in Mozambique, or you have a cyclone in Madagascar. So how do you actually take these very big things into account when you do your thinking on investments?
Thank you, Charlotte. Thank you. May I just start by complimenting both on the EU focus on Africa, while strongly facing the Portuguese sort of leading the way here. I also believe that this focus is quite strongly embedded both in member states and also in institutions in Brussels, because it is the right focus, and it's shared with many. And may I also just on your question on energy use towards when we're working with adaptation, I think we have to look at increased energy use in Africa as a good thing and not a bad thing. Usually we talk about energy use as it should be. We should try to decrease it, but I think an increased energy use in Africa is an absolutely need for economic progress, and that is the most important overall sort of, I don't know the most, but is it so. But the main question here is what kind of energy, how is it produced, and how is it provided, and there are so large and good opportunities for renewable energy in Africa that the challenge is to sort of to increase that instead of more traditional energy sources. On the climate change or the adaptation projects, I mean they differ a little bit from other kinds of projects, because in a solar project in Spain or in Morocco or in South Africa would probably look more or less the same, while adaptation challenges and also solutions are usually very local in their sort of how they come up specifically, and how also solutions should be made specifically. But when we sort of look at it, I mean, I'm not a technician, but when we look at a project and evaluate how will it fare in the future in terms of climate change, I mean, we are looking at projections on water levels, increased rainfalls, increased wind strength, and all the like, and put them not only how it is today, but also how it is seen as to be in the future. And then we sort of see, okay, does it, in the simple way, does this new building, does it have to be put a meter higher or not? It's not always very complicated, but as also in the developed world, the adaptation is often not very complicated. It's sometimes about the size of the tubes and taking the water and stuff like that. But the specific thing here is that these that the projects or the challenges to be met are often not the same across sectors, across countries. They are very specific. Thank you.
I think I have a question for you, Mr. Thompson, from the ambassador of Switzerland, Florence Tingley-Matty. She's asking, is there an estimation of the amount of investments needed in developing green energy in Africa until 2050? Are you aware of the amount of investment needed? And is the international community able or ready to invest enough to compete with fossil fuel energy?
Thank you. I'm sure there is I've seen a lot of numbers on investment needs in a lot of areas, and I'm sure I will probably also seen one on the green energy investments in Africa. I'm not, but I must admit I cannot recall one for 2050. And the question is, and if I find it, I'll send it to you. Then you can, if you can send it on. But the question is very relevant because, I mean, in Africa that we have the double, or sort of, there's a double challenge. It's both sort of transition to change some of the existing fossil energy production, but also to increase energy provisions for a lot of people who don't have energy access today, and so there is a huge investment need here, and is it achievable? I think I think it's important also what Mr. Molin said, that the price of fossil, or not fossil, but of renewable energies has actually fallen so much, so it's very competitive, particularly in places where the sources of renewable energy like the sun and wind is so abundant as it is in Africa, and also there will but to meet such large numbers as we're talking about here, I think it's necessary to have the private financing much stronger integrated than maybe it is today, and find ways of sort of both to sort of blend private finance, grant financing, other kinds of finance, so that because the public budgets will not be able to go all the way here. But I'll try and look out for a number, and then I'll send it to you. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think we have time for last comments from everybody. I will first pass on the word to Mrs. Santos Costa, just for a final word.
Thank you very much. I just want to say, well, thank you for all the inputs that you have provided. I think it's important for us to really understand what is the potential that can be in making those bridges that I mentioned in my intervention, in my initial intervention. But I think it is important to also recognize that we need to be aware of all the good bottom-up approaches that are already on the ground in African countries that are pushing forward a more resilient, a more circular, a more decarbonized economy. Let me say, for example, all the work that the African Circular Economy Network is doing on the ground, with a lot of projects, a lot of case studies already happening around agriculture, around water and wastewater, around strengthening environmental services, which were adamant for getting through our pandemic enclosed year. If there is really an area which is essential to strengthen within a country, is indeed the environmental essential services, and this is an opportunity to really put forward a decarbonizing commitment with and bridge with African countries, bringing in and learning from this mutual collaboration in order to jointly move towards carbon neutrality. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And then quickly to Rita for a final comment.
Thank you, Charlotte. I will probably do is pay tribute to Denmark and pay tribute to Morocco on these issues, because it is very important that both at the EU level, at the African level, there are countries that champion this cause. And I think that Denmark is in Europe is a very good example. As Thomas has put it, they were presenting these non-paper on the challenges on the climate regarding the preparations of the EU-AU summit, and that is of course essential in the way that Thomas has led the discussions on this group of eminent persons that have been discussing the EU-AU relations in of climate change and climate transition, and also and mainly Morocco, because it's essential that among the EU partners there are countries that lead in this issue, and that they show the commitment to, despite all the difficulties that we have highlighted here, that they are willing to have very relevant policy changes that are essential to set the structure for this transition to be made, and have the courage to lead by example and set the example for the other African countries to follow them. Thank you.
Thank you, Rita. And Thomas, a final word?
Well, just to echo Rita and everyone else, I think since we have, in a way, gained time for the summit, it's now about, as soon as we can sit together, to roll up our sleeves and to define a few very concrete, very sizable deliverables and actions that we jointly can take to get this huge opportunity of greening African energy to the scale where the development aspirations of the continent are, to get those really underway. And I think the will is there, the financing is there, the technologies are there, so let's get to work.
Thank you, Thomas. And Mr. Moulin?
Well, you know, where danger grows also that which saves. And climate change is here. It's huge, huge danger for the whole humanity. And we believe that we have some solutions. I'm quite optimistic because we reach the economy of renewables. That's the key. And today, many applications in the north and the south, green electricity, maybe green hydrogen tomorrow, in the north and in the south. So I'm quite optimistic because of this new approach on the economy of renewables and huge opportunities for our continent. It's a shame that 600 million citizens today still don't have access to electricity. It's a huge also opportunity for the young people to find jobs in this field, and capacity building will be also key. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And then finally, Mr. Thompson, the final word.
There should be and sort of that I think we should encourage stronger European cooperation in this respect, both particularly in relation to Africa. I think many member states, many EU agencies and development banks have the focus there, but I think we could get more development and more effect from a little bit stronger coordination, and the summit later this year could be an event for doing more of this. Thank you.
Thank you. And now I would like, just on behalf of the Danish Foreign Policy Society and the Portuguese embassy here in Copenhagen, and Ambassador, just to say thank you to you all. Thank you for participating. I think it's been a really exciting event for me personally, at least. And I look forward to the outcome of the 23rd April high-level meeting. So good luck to you all, and thank you so much for participating.
Thank you.
And thank you to the participants.